I'm Sam.
And this is Gabe.
And this is Coaster Wars.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to the Coaster Wars podcast. On this episode, we actually ride roller coasters. Huh, who knew?
Yeah, that is a thing that we actually do. How much we talk about it, we finally have an episode where we're talking about doing it, so.
Every once in a great while, we actually do ride a roller coaster.
Oh yeah, and this is our home park. It's a park we've been to about a bajillion times. Roller coasters we've also ridden a billion times.
It's the one park Sam can have actually navigate on her own.
Yes. Oh my gosh.
Now.
For those who don't know, I don't know if we talked about it too much in this podcast. I am of the directionally challenged crowd, and let's just say last time
directionally challenged and vertically challenged.
Oh, shut up. When I went to Hershey Park by myself, let's just say I almost couldn't find my car. So it's bad.
Oh, oopsies.
Yeah.
You got it. You found it. It only took you like an hour. It's okay.
Yeah. I didn't find it until most everybody else had cleared out.
Well, that's what it takes. That's what it takes
is right. So this is our Trips Talk episode on Six Flags Great America. Me and Gabe took sort of a surprise trip here for just the day. It was to activate my season pass, but we said, why just do that? Why not actually get on some coasters? And what me and Gabe realized is this is actually our first set of coasters for the 2025 season. So that was kind of exciting. In fact, we started... Yeah, we started with sort of a weird one that we don't normally start with. Do we just kind of want to dive into the coasters, Gabe, or how are we going to do this?
I figured we could do... I don't know. How did we do our last one?
I don't freaking remember.
I figured we could just do a general overview of the park, and then we could just talk about the specific coasters we wanted to talk about.
Okay, that sounds perfect. So, maybe we'll just do a quick overview of the lineup and then the ones that we rode, and then, like you said, we can go more in depth.
So, Great America currently features 15 coasters, soon to be 16.
Yep.
We'll talk about that a little more later. But anyway, they have 15 coasters. However, I'm only going to mention 12 because I don't talk about S&S free spins anymore, and then the other two are family coasters, or little kiddie coasters.
Yep.
I guess we could just mention them really quick. The two kiddie coasters are the Little Dipper and Sprocket Rockets. And then so for the major roller coasters, we'll say that. How does that sound?
Yes.
Because we're still not including Joker in any of these.
No.
We don't like S&S free spins. They don't exist in our heads anymore. Anyway, starting off at the top, we'll do this alphabetically because that's how it's organized on my list. Starting with American Eagle, a classic wooden roller coaster from Intamin. We have Batman the Ride, the original, not a clone, the original, the OG Batman the Ride B&M invert. The one that started it all, as we like to say. Then we have Dark Knight, which is an indoor Wild Mouse coaster. Who makes that? Do you know? Oh, it's Mock. Really?
Damn.
Okay, I would have been wrong on that one. Then we have Demon, which is a classic aero looper. Custom,
yeah. Custom.
Then we have Flash Vertical Velocity. It used to be known as V Squared, if anybody knows that far back. But it is an Intamin Impulse shuttle coaster. Then we have Goliath, which is a ground-up RMC topper track Woody. It is not a conversion. It is a ground-up design. Then we have Max Force, probably one of the more unique roller coasters at this. Wow. They have a lot of very unique coasters at this park. But that is a S&S compressed air launch coaster. Then we have Raging Bull, which is their classic B&M Hyper. They don't make them like they used to, that's for sure. Then we have Superman Ultimate Flight, which is a clone of the Ultimate Flight Flyer from Six Flags Over Georgia, B&M. Then we have Viper. Now, Viper is another interesting coaster because it is an actually in-house construction Woody,
Yeah.
based off the Coney Island cyclone. Then we have the Whizzer, which is a Schwarzkopf speed racer model. Now, I have called it the toboggan coaster multiple times on this podcast just to really confuse you guys, just to really, really throw you off the case. But its
Yep.
actual model name would be Speed Racer. And then we have X Flight, one of the original B&M wing coasters. Now, we were having an argument about this. I want to know what was the first wing coaster. So now I have to look.
See, X Flight is always one of the first ones, but I don't think it is
Is
the
the original?
first. Yeah.
Okay, so the first one, let's
It might be the first
see.
in the United States. That might be what it is.
We have one in 2011 called Raptor. Swarm was in 2012. So it's the third one. It's the third one built.
Where are the other two located, though?
The Swarm is Thorpe Park, which is over in Great Britain.
Yep.
And Raptor is Gardaland. I've never heard of this park because it is in Italy, of all places.
So yeah, X Flight is the first one in the United States then.
Yes. That's not a wing coaster, is it? Oh, it is. Oh, that's kind of a neat looking coaster, actually. We should go ride it. We're going to Italy, guys. No, I'm kidding.
I would
Sorry,
go back to Italy.
We're getting a little off track here. I was curious. We were arguing about it while we were in line, and I'm like, I'm pretty sure it's the original. And she's like, no, it's not. There's a couple other ones. I'm like, no, pretty sure it's the original. It was like a 45-minute argument. It was great.
Yep. That's just a sibling rivalry right there, let me tell you.
That is the lineup.
Why don't we start off? So there are a few rides on this list that we actually did not get rides on. So when we went to the park, some of them were actually closed and other ones we just skipped because they're not our favorites. So we skipped Superman Ultimate Flight. We have never been a fan of these flyers. Now, we shouldn't say all B&M flyers because these are the prototype. And like Gabe said, this is actually a clone. We have ridden all of the clones and the originals, and none of them have like super blown us out of the water. And then Gabe was saying that he rode this last year and it was somehow even worse.
Yeah, my significant other is a huge fan of this coaster, which I don't know why. But I feel like it's a very popular ride in the GP. I think it's
I was just about to say
different way to ride a roller coaster. Not saying that my girlfriend's a GP, but she kind of is. Anyway,
she kind of is.
My point being that it's just for us, it's not our favorite. I do enjoy the pretzel loop, but then everything after that and everything before that is just kind of exists at this point.
Yeah.
So, but I was not very impressed. I felt like it was actually kind of running rough last year. I don't know, maybe I just go in already knowing I'm not really going to enjoy it that much, so then I just automatically hate it. But that's where we're at with the Superman ride.
Yeah. Moving on, we have the Dark Knight coaster, which Gabe said was the Wild Mouse indoor coaster. And I think it's just one of those things where, well, so it's
we actually love this coaster.
Yeah.
We actually love this coaster. We're not going to wait an hour for it, though. I can tell you that much.
That's what I was just about to say, is that it had basically the longest wait. Well, we thought was the longest wait until we got in line for the Wizard, but we'll get to that in a minute. So yeah, we were like, we love this coaster. It's usually a lot of fun. The Dark Knight theming is super well done, and it's got a lot of little gimmicky parts.
Well done, cheesy.
Yeah,
like two different descriptive words you could use for it, I guess.
Right. So it's usually a lot of fun, and in the summertime it actually is air conditioned in there, so sometimes even if it is an hour wait you don't mind waiting. But it's like we had other coasters we wanted to ride, it was not super hot out, and we're like, yeah, we're not waiting an hour when there are other things we could be riding at this moment in time. So
that, and we were kind of already on limited hours because we really didn't get into the park till about 11, and they closed early at 8 o'clock, being early in the season. So we were already short basically 3 hours of park time. So we're like, we can skip it. We actually didn't even go to that section of the park because Dark Knight and Superman are right next to each other. So we didn't even touch that whole section of the park when we were there, which I'm okay with that, to be honest with you.
Agreed. So it's very close to the entrance, so it also gets pretty busy in that section of the park. So it was just like it was kind of nice to just skip that for now.
Save
So
some steps.
exactly. Jesus, you do so much walking at theme parks. So the other coaster that we did not get a chance to ride on, and this one we were actually very bummed about. If anybody heard our episode before we went to the park, we were really excited to hopefully see this ride open. But of course, it was not because the new ride is going in right next to it, and that is Demon. Because me and Gabe have both not had a ride on Demon in quite a few years. And so we were kind of excited, but we also weren't sure if it was going to be open. So we weren't that disappointed. And hopefully we'll just be able to come back, especially when we come back to ride the new ride and it'll be open. We'll be able to get a ride on it.
Yeah, let's actually, why don't we lump that up here into one little section? So, yes, the Demon is getting a full brand new station from what we could tell. Now, that was a little
Yeah,
more than from what I was understanding originally. So, the new roller coaster, I'm going to struggle here, Wrath of Rakshasha.
I
That's what I'm
believe
going with.
yes.
We're calling it the Rack. That's the
For short,
nickname we've dubbed
yes.
it, or the Wrath of Rock Johnson, depending on your mood. But
Gabe was just messing around in line with the name and I heard him say that and I
yeah,
said, I hope you know I am now calling it that forever. It's
yeah.
now the
I, I'm
roller
gonna
coaster's name.
I'm gonna be honest. The people who are naming roller coasters at Six Flags they need to do better. I understand they probably have like 1,000 coasters in their chain at this point, but like,
But
come on,
still.
we could do better than that, tongue twister. So for the duration of this podcast, you'll probably hear us refer to it as the Rack.
Yep.
Um, why not call another coaster Steve? So I
Yeah,
think it
exactly.
works. I don't know.
Exactly.
I hope this is what makes us famous. By the way,
That would be awesome.
is coming up with the nickname for the new coaster at Great
Yes.
America.
Oh, that would be
Um,
beautiful.
yeah. Anyway, so they are putting in a brand new dive coaster. Now, this roller coaster is going to be a very interesting roller coaster from B&M for
Mhm.
two particular reasons. Number one, it is a very, very small space they squeezed this coaster into. We're
Oh my
we're also
gosh.
joking about this while we were at the park. Whoever's doing the math at Six Flags Great
Oh,
America needs a raise because like the supports are so close to Demon and that first inversion butts right up over the train tracks that run in between it, in between Demon and the new coaster now. So like not only were they dealing with Demon itself, but they're also dealing with the train tracks and trying not to have to take those out or reroute them. And I mean feet, like feet
yes.
away from each other.
Oh
So
my gosh.
they did a really good job squeezing a lot of roller coaster into a very small space.
Yes.
However, that leads me to believe that this roller coaster is going to run a little differently than most B&Ms, including like hypers, and I think this is going to feel closer to an invert than a
Yes, that's what I
hyper.
was thinking.
Yes, because it's going to be, but it's still going to be like zero G focus because three of the inversions are zero G rolls. There's not
Yeah.
really an airtime moment, but the first two inversions are loops, and then the second or the last three are going to be zero G rolls. And the pacing on this coaster, now obviously we did not get to see it test in person. I saw that there was a
No.
video out, but from what I can tell, just looking at the layout, it seems like the pacing is going to be a little bit quicker than what we're used to, which also makes me very excited for this coaster.
Yes, very much so. And then we also have to talk about the drop on this roller coaster and just how insane it looks because it is 96 degrees beyond vertical. And we talk about the dive coaster at Cedar Point, Val Raven, and how good the drop is there. So this just looks like it's going to be an out of control experience, just straight from the drop on this ride.
Yeah, so the stats they have listed on RCDB, 3,239 feet long. So they packed 5 inversions into basically 3,000 feet, which I think is
Holy
very
hell.
impressive. They have
Yes.
a top height of 180 feet, a top drop height of 171 feet, a top speed of 67 miles per hour. This is not going to be a slow coaster. And that's the point I'm
No.
trying to make, is
Yeah.
that I feel like after the first two inversions, this coaster is going to really carry its speed through the rest of the layout. So this is what they're calling the elements, by the way. So you have the Immelman loop to start with, which is like traditional
Yep.
dive coaster stuff. Then you have a dive loop. Then they have a zero G roll, but it's called a variant.
Okay.
Now I'm curious to see why it's a variant of it. Probably because of the turn at the top, is what I would think
Probably.
after you go through it. Then they're actually calling the third or the fourth inversion a corkscrew, which I thought it was another roll. I didn't realize it was a corkscrew.
Okay.
And then the last element they're just calling a barrel roll.
Okay.
So, but to call the last one a barrel, okay, I can see the corkscrew, but to call the last one a barrel roll, I guess we'll go with that. But it is a very interesting layout. I'm very excited actually. Seeing it in person, it is gorgeous. It is
Yes.
absolutely a. If you want a coaster that would look like it would be on the cover of Time magazine, like this is
Yeah.
it. This is real legitimately it. It is such a beautiful color. It really pops. It's at the very center of the park, so you can see
Mhm.
it from every angle. Every coaster we rode, you could actually get a really good view of it. And I'm actually, like I said, I feel like this is going to fit into Six Flags Great America's lineup very, very well.
Oh yeah. We were talking about initially when we heard they were getting this coaster and we're like, "Oh, they're getting a new coaster." And then we found out it was a dive coaster and we're like, "Oh, they're getting a dive coaster." And then of course, they're the only I shouldn't say the only record because we're not so focused on records, but they were advertising it as the steepest dive coaster. So we're like, "Oh, okay." We weren't expecting too much. And then as the day went on, and like Gabe said, you could literally see this from any park. So it was like when we were waiting in line at was it Goliath? You could see some of it. And I think the biggest thing though was the lift hills. When we were on the lift hills of
Yes.
like literally any ride, you got a bird's eye view of this layout and you could see it. So we were just staring at it all day long basically. And we're like, holy crap, it's actually a decent layout, and with that speed it should carry throughout the whole thing. And then just seeing the lift hill and the drop, we're like, all right, this might be a little better than we were giving it credit for.
This is
So
gonna make Six Flags Great America the park of first drops.
yes.
That is my hot take. That is my hot take.
I think I agree with you though, Gabe, because we have Goliath and we have Raging Bull, which has like the best drop on any hyper
Well,
ever.
even if you throw in like Eagle,
Oh
like
yeah.
Eagle's first drop in the back row, slightly insane.
Yes. Oh my
You
gosh.
have you have Viper's first drop with that little twist in the back
Yep.
row that gives you some really good laterals.
Yeah.
Then you have Raging Bull, which is the single best drop on a roller coaster in existence. It's funny because we were arguing this like before we
Yeah.
got our final two rides on the coaster, and then I never really mentioned it after that because I didn't want to say you were right. You were right. The Raging Bull's first drop is just absolutely insane. And comparing it to Goliath's, like if you take Goliath's first drop and you drop it into any other amusement park, probably in the US, it is the best first drop.
Oh
And then
yeah.
you put it next to Raging Bull, it's like, sorry, you're the second
Mm-mm.
best. Like,
I don't know. We cannot figure out what that. Well, we think it's part of it is the magic ninth row on Raging Bull, and we'll talk about that more later. But it's just crazy how different it feels to anything else that you ride.
it's the combination of the ninth row and the pre-drop and the slight jankiness that Raging Bull has kind of developed over the years. I think
Yeah.
that was one thing I noticed. So it was still running smooth, but it had potholes, but like not in a bad way. Like the potholes were
No.
just the right spot. Like when you go over that first drop, you kind of hit one of those, especially in the back row, you can feel it, and it's like
Hmm.
yanks you out of your seat. It's almost like an ejector moment. But then because the drop is so long, it like just kind of holds you in space, like in
Oh
that
yeah.
zone between the restraint and the seat, and it's just so insane. It throws the butterflies in your stomach. Like I feel like we're getting off track here. We're talking about Raging Bull now. We were
Yep.
talking about the new coaster, but yeah, this is going to be. The Six Flags of first drops. If you like first
Yes,
drops,
very much so.
this is where you need to go.
Yeah, so and talking about this new ride, we can get into the ride that is basically right next to it. As Gabe said, the mathematician of this park really needs a raise. Is going to be Demon, and Demon, it's really going to be the tale of two different worlds because not only is it B&M and Arrow, it's going to be a 1976 roller coaster next to a 2025 roller coaster. It's going to be a hundred and some foot drop. How much is it, Gabe? Again, 174.
The total height is 180 and the drop height's 171.
So 171 next to a drop that is a mere 90 feet. But they have close to the same number of inversions because Demon has 4 inversions on it, 2 vertical loops and 2 corkscrews, and the rack is going to have 5 inversions. And so it's going to be really, I think, really interesting and really kind of cool to have these two sort of different roller coasters with some similarities next to each other. And they also were talking about, so I am the theming queen. So they are talking about sort of integrating the theming between these two rides. So the demon, obviously, is the name speaks for itself. It's just a generic, it was a demon. Although, in our episode about this ride, I didn't get a chance to mention this. So, the whole story behind the demon is that Six Flags Great America missed payments on the roller coaster. And so, a demon came to quote unquote repossess it. So, that is the story of this ride, which I just think is hilarious. And again, some of the most 80s things ever. So, and then Demon has just a really great theming. It's got rock facades that make this a great ride. And then it has the original 80s song that plays in the queue. So, it's going to be very interesting to see how they kind of tie in the rack's theming to all of this. Because the rack itself is the story of a Hindu demon and also possession and stuff like that. So, they have very similar themings, and I'm very excited for that aspect of these two rides being very close together.
Yeah, so I'm trying to zoom in on the picture they have on RCDB. Sorry, I'm getting off track here again.
You're fine.
But it's very hard to tell, and it was very hard to tell from the pathway looking in. But in the picture where they have a picture of the finished rack next to
Hmm.
the demon, it does look like they were doing construction on the station itself, which was
Okay.
what we were surprised by. So, because we
Yeah.
knew basically the second inversion of the rack
Hmm.
and the basically the pullout from the first inversion into the second version and the second version all into like that whole section of ride is right
Yep.
on top of where the original queue line used to run for the demon. So that's
Yeah.
why they posted that little teaser showing that it's going to get a new queue line. But part of that also looks like, and from what we could tell when we were actually there, they're also going to be redoing the station, which probably means they're going to be updating the theme in for the demon.
That
I did
was a
not
great
plan
pun there.
that. Yes.
Oh, so
But yeah,
yes,
so
it go
go ahead.
ahead. No, you go.
No, you go.
Well, fine. I was just gonna say that it's gonna be really interesting to see when this ride fully opens. So, as far as we know, they have run test trains, but it's looking like they either, well, first of all, they need to finish all the construction around it because I don't think they finished the station for the ride, and they haven't finished the path that will go under this ride. And then on top of that, when we were there, we actually saw what we assumed to be a maintenance guy at the very top of the drop for the rack. So they must maybe still be making some adjustments and stuff. And then it still has to go through its inspection, as far as we know. We were very hopeful that it would be open, but when once we got there and see all the stuff that they had to still do, we're like, oh yeah, there's no way it's opening for like another month at least, probably.
Yeah. The other cool thing about this photo too is you realize how close X Flight is to both coasters.
Yeah, that was the other thing I was gonna mention where you were talking about the math guy. I'm like, I want to just meet him and shake his hand and be like, "Damn, dude, you are good." Because yeah, it's not even just these two coasters together. It's like Max Force is also over there, really close to the Whizzer, and then yeah, X Flight gets very very close to the Demon as well, and it's just the amount of coasters that they actually managed to pack into this space. And then we were also talking about this in our previous episode with Six Flags Great America. They're basically landlocked because they've got the highway on one side, residential on the other, and then the parking lot on the other. So it's like, and they can only build so close to the highway. In fact, we talk about with American Eagle how if they ever tore that down where the Rose Bowl is, they probably won't be able to put anything there because it is so close to the highway. So they've kind of had to just squeeze things in as they can. And it's sort of, when you notice
I
it,
would
then,
hope I would hope if they ever managed to take the Eagle out, they would just leave the Rose Bowl section
oh, that
so it
would
would
be
still be a
cool.
part of the skyline, because that is the
Yeah.
most iconic photo of Great America is when you're driving
Yeah.
up the highway and you come around the corner and you just see this massive white structure right next to the
Yes.
road. So I would hope that they would leave that. That would be my little tidbit there. But yeah, it's very contrasting though too, because I didn't realize the demon's completely black, right?
Yep.
And then you have this shiny, like bluish purple, brand new coaster. And then next to that, you also have X Flight, which is bright red.
Yep.
This is a very contrasting set of roller coasters, even though two of them are B&Ms.
Yes. Yes, it is. So, sort of from that, moving on, I think the next one I want to talk about was sort of kind of the surprise of this trip and has been the surprise the past few times we've gone to Six Flags is Viper.
Yeah, Viper really impressed us. Now, one thing that we had learned over the process of this day is that Viper's actually fully completed a retrack now. Now, it took several
Yes.
years. They did it in sections. They didn't do it all in 1 year, but it is fully complete and it actually is running better than ever from what we can remember. We were
Yes.
very impressed. Made the statement, I think it's the fourth best roller coaster in the park, which is kind of a bold statement if you really think about it. You're like, oh, fourth best coaster. That's not really that great. But that's saying it's better than Batman,
Yeah.
Superman, Vertical Velocity, and American Eagle. Like,
Which is a hefty statement, but we're
yes,
considering it true at this point.
yes.
Because it so to tell the story of Viper, we probably rode this thing once or twice when we were kids, when we didn't care so much, but the Viper has always been a story of a rough wooden roller coaster to the point where you don't want to ride it. Oftentimes we would come back to Six Flags and we would skip Viper because we didn't want to ride the janky, uncomfortable, not fun wooden roller coaster at the very back of the park, especially when it sits sort of right next to Raging Bull. You're like, I'd rather spend the hour waiting for that instead of waiting in line for
It
this.
was
So go ahead.
it was always the other coaster on that side
Yeah.
of the park. And it was like, now that you had Max Force over there too. Well, Max Force is at the very front of the park, but you're like, I'm gonna ride Max Force. We're gonna ride Whizzer, and then you get over to Raging Bull, and you're kind of start looking at your times, and you're like, we can always come back to the Viper. You ride
Yep.
Raging Bull, you ride the Giant Drop, you head over to X Flight and Eagle, and all of a sudden the day's gone, and you never got on Viper, and
Yep.
that's kind of how it was for us.
Well, and at the
And
same time, we were never bummed that we missed it either. We're like, it's
no,
totally fine. We're okay to skip it if we have to.
so what happened is we got to the park and X Flight was still in the process of pre-testing for the day when the
Yep.
park opened, and we came around the corner to Whizzer, and Whizzer had a absolutely insane line at the time, like
Yep.
even more insane than when we waited for it. We still waited an hour for it.
Yeah.
So we were like, let's go ride Viper. It's just around the corner. And then we got on Viper and we were like, whoa,
What
what what
even?
yeah. And it wasn't even running the fastest it was that day at that point. So then
No.
we were like, man, this is cool. We actually rode it twice right away, didn't we?
Yeah, we did. We did because the other thing with
Yeah.
Viper is it's kind of like American Eagle. It's quite a walk to get back in there. So I don't know if it's that. I don't know if it's because it's wooden coaster or because it's not that well known, but it usually doesn't have that long of a line. So did we walk all the way around, Gabe, or were we able to just get on the next train right away?
No, we had to walk all the way around. We
Okay,
ended up
but still.
walking all the way around, and then that's when we found out Max Force was testing. That's when we
Oh
saw it launch.
yeah.
And then yeah. But anyway, so we actually were so impressed by our first ride, we rode it a second time
Mhm.
right away. But let's just talk about some stats real quick. So this
Yeah, I was gonna do that too.
coaster features 3,500 feet of track, top height of 100 feet, top drop of 80 feet, a top speed of 50 miles per hour,
Mhm.
and a vertical angle of 53 degrees. Now, this drop, I know I was saying, oh, it's one of the better first drops, whatever. Not because of the airtime,
Nope.
because of the laterals. It is not a
Yes.
straight drop, but it has a slight angle to it, twist to it, whatever descripting word you would like
Yep.
to use. And it gives some really nice snap in the back row.
Yes.
Some really good lateral side to side, but because it is like a side to side movement, it feels like airtime, but I know it's not because it's not a
Yeah.
very steep drop.
Yep.
But overall, just the airtime on this roller coaster after that, though, it was running
Oh
really
yeah.
well. It really was.
It really was. And we do it's not the laterals on just this drop that it gives you. It does it in like every corner because where this coaster should have banking, it just doesn't. And then it has like slight banking. And even like in one of the corners, it like banks for 2 seconds and then literally straightens back out as it goes further into the corner, sharper. And you're like, see, that's where the banking should be. And it isn't. So it gives you very good laterals in those moments. And then, yeah, it features a lot of really short, snappy airtime hills that give you really they give you floater, but at sometimes it's even just fully ejector. And especially so we rode it twice at the very beginning of the day. Well, we loved it so much we came back and rode it later in the day and it was an even better ride. So
Yeah,
yes.
it was a very chilly start to the day. It was only about 40 degrees out.
Mhm.
So everything that we got on early in the day was not nearly running at its full potential. And the fact
Oh
that this
yeah.
was our first coaster and we got off it like, hold on, we should ride this again.
Yeah. Oh
Really
yeah.
goes to show you how well it was running. And then afterwards, we rode Max Force and Whizzer. And since it was on our way to Raging Bull, we actually rode it a third time. And
Yep.
that's when we got the best ride on it of that day. And we were just absolutely blown away. Like, why we always skip this thing?
Oh yeah. We're pretty convinced that we don't know for sure because we haven't read it anywhere, but we're practically pretty convinced that when they did the retracking, they might have also done some reprofiling or something to kind of smooth out some of the jankiness in it. Because yeah, it is a very decent ride now, and it is like don't skip it anymore. It is a very good coaster.
Yeah, well, you do have to remember it is kind of an in-house construction.
Yeah.
So like I'm sure maybe their first attempt might have not have been their best attempt, maybe, is
Oh
kind of what
yeah.
I'm getting at. Some
Yeah.
of it too, I think, is just they got rid of a lot of the roughness, and that
Yeah.
can actually speed a coaster up.
Yeah.
You get what
Oh,
I'm
okay.
saying? With a
Yeah.
retract, not as much bouncing on the track, vibrations and stuff like that. It can actually cause a coaster to speed up slightly and run like it was on opening day. And now I can see why this coaster, was such a hit when it opened because it really
Mhm.
is one of the better Woodies that we've been on.
Yeah, absolutely. With that, what coaster do you kind of want to move into, Gabe?
You know what we got to talk about, right?
Max Force.
No, who
Oh.
cares about that coaster? That coaster is one thing only, and that's the launch. Let's be honest
Okay.
here.
American Eagle is what you want to talk about.
You're so disappointing.
Oh, I don't. Fine. What do you want to talk about?
Goliath!
Oh.
My favorite coaster at Great America, of course.
Well, I know, but you gave me no hints on where we're going. We could go in 5 million different directions because we were impressed with a lot when we went to go ride them. So,
That is true. We did have a lot of very good rides that day at the park. I'll give
yes.
you that.
Yeah, exactly. So let's talk
But
about
let's talk
Goliath.
about Goliath. Now, I made some very, very bold statements after getting off our initial ride. Now, we did
Yes.
ride this coaster a total of 3 times while we were at the park that day.
Mhm.
And the original comment that I had made, the very bold statement, was a little exaggerated. However, it still kind of is true. So the statement I made is, man, that's better than Area Force One, and I said it as a joke. However, one element on this ride is better than Area Force One, and that is the
Mhm.
zero G stall. Now, I remember talking about Area Force One in our podcast a few episodes back. If you'd like to go listen to that podcast, it is our previous trip talk episode when we did our three park trip, four
Yep.
park, three park,
3 park.
three park trip this past November. And I got off Area Force One saying, man, that is the best stall since Goliath. I
Yep.
was incorrect. It is the second best stall since Goliath, because Goliath is still the best. There is just something about the profiling in the sustained zero G upside down moment that it is that makes it one of my favorite inversions of all time.
Oh yeah. There's a lot we can talk about with Goliath. The Because we talked about it already with the drop on this ride. The drop is absolute insanity, and it is 180 feet, which is absolutely crazy for a wooden roller coaster to begin with. And then the fact that it is completely vertical, so you just feel like you're getting pulled directly out of your seat, and then just because of the length of it, you do feel like you are just floating there forever. And then you plunge down into that tunnel and you go, is no, because when is the Giro D stall in Goliath? I always forget.
So if you want a quick breakdown of the elements, you have the
Yeah.
first drop through the
Hmm.
tunnel, the first of two weird, wacky overbank turn
Things. Yeah.
things. They're not overbank turns, but they're not a wave turn, but they're not
Y-
an airtime moment either. It's like two airtime moments and a turn. I don't know. Anyway, we're still figuring that one out. So you
yeah.
have, I'll just call it a turnaround, is what I'll call it.
Okay.
It is
Okay.
Goliath's custom turnaround
Turn
element.
around.
So you have the first drop, tunnel, turnaround element, airtime moment, dive loop,
okay.
zero G stall,
Okay.
into the tunnel, second turnaround element, and then the pop. It's an airtime hill, but then you end up on the final brakes right away.
Yep.
So it's not a very complicated coaster. It's a very 1, 2, 3, 4 coaster. It's in order. I like it.
Yes.
The thing I like about this
yes.
coaster, and I talk about a lot, is this coaster has 1, 2, 3, 4, basically 5 elements.
Hmm.
Basically 5 total elements. If you include the first drop, it's six.
Yep.
6 total elements, which isn't a lot, but each element is individual and stands out in its own way. It's not like a Steel Vengeance where you get off and you don't know what happened to you because there are so many. It's like 50 elements, but they're all so small and short and kind of flow together to create one ride experience. Where this is
Hmm.
more like 6 individual moments pieced together to create a coaster. And that's what I love about Goliath.
Yes. And to also speak, those each of those elements is also really well done. So you enjoy every single one of them. It's not like obviously the zero G stall stands out on this ride, but every single element also stands out on this ride. So it makes it for an overall really great experience. We talk about the pacing on this roller coaster and how great the pacing is on this roller coaster. And to talk about that zero G stall. So when we got to the park, we're like, all right, we have no idea what the hell they did. We don't know if they trimmed the trees, took a tree out, or what, but for some reason, we felt like we could see so much of Goliath when we went to the park this time. And we talk about how Goliath doesn't look as imposing because it is the 165 feet, but the drop is 180. So you're like, it doesn't seem as big as it actually is. Well, let me tell you, that time at the park, it looked freaking huge. But it was really cool too because you could see just the beautiful open expanse that is the zero G stall. and you could just see how long the freaking track is for that one single element. And you're like, I swear to God, it's like a third of the coaster. It's just so big. And then another thing too is they painted the tracks on this roller coaster a really bright orange color. And so we were the second time we were riding this coaster, or technically our third ride on it, but the second time we went around to ride it, the sun was setting and it was just like freaking lighting up those tracks. It looked really pretty. So it was really cool to see more of this coaster than we've ever actually seen when you're not riding it, and it just allowed us to really observe these elements in their entireties, and it was very cool to look at as roller coaster enthusiasts, and especially understanding what these elements do when you're on the coaster, and just to get to look at them. They're so pretty.
Yeah, and I think the other thing that's very understated about this roller coaster is the fact that it's technically considered a full wooden roller coaster.
Yes.
And I think that's the part I
Yes.
think a lot of people forget about. It's like if you consider this next to a Steel Vengeance or an Iron Gwazi, coasters that both feature steel track, it does come a little bit short. But if you compare this to an El Toro or a Mystic Timbers or
Oh
even
yeah.
a Voyage, which I have not been on, you could say this is almost better. I will
Yeah.
say this. Part of me wants to say it's better than Mystic Timbers. I really do. El Toro, I'm sorry. El Toro is just another ride experience altogether.
Yeah. Let's be honest here.
But this coaster, when you look at the wooden coasters of this world, is a top 5 roller coaster.
Yes. I totally agree with you. All right, talking about wooden coasters, I already mentioned it and I really want to talk about it. And I know that we sort of kind of done an episode on this because we just talked about Intimate, but we have to talk about how well American Eagle was running.
Yeah, still down to one side. That was kind of
Yeah.
to be expected, especially this early in the season.
Yes.
That being said, the red side,
Actually,
absolutely.
pause for just a second. We did go super early in the season, and something that I always forget about, and Gabe reminded me of, is that a lot of these parks rely on summer workers. So we think we got there sort of before that rush. And it was like, so they were running one train on Wizard, they were only running one train on Batman, and they were running two trains on American Eagle, but they were only running one side. And that could have literally actually just been a staffing issue. They might have not have had the staff to run the other side. So continue.
No, it was very clearly a staffing issue everywhere we
Oh,
went.
okay.
Little side note here, the concessions needed a couple more
Oh,
employees. The
yeah.
entrance needed like 7 more employees. You could
Yes.
tell they were also training people on the fly, especially with the
Yep.
Wizard. That's why we ended
Mhm.
up waiting an hour for it.
Yes.
But yeah, it was slightly disappointing, I will admit, to see the state of employment at Six Flags Great America and how much of a struggle it really is to get employees right now for these
Mhm.
parks. Now, in other places in the country, it might be different, but here in the Midwest, that is a legitimate issue these parks are facing right now, is just having enough
Mhm.
staff to run the park.
Yeah. So, with that said, first of all, Wizard was terrible, but I felt like Batman, even with one train, like we flew through that freaking line. And then, of course, like Goliath is always going to be slow because you can't pull the lap bars. They have to check your seatbelts. So, half of it is the ride ups, but the other half of it is just the way the ride needs to be operated. Of course, Raging Bull is always going to have the best ops in the park. And then on top of that, it's just the clamshell. There's not even a seatbelt on the ride, so it is super easy to just really quickly check the train. I feel like Viper was running really well, but they were also running two trains. Um,
Viper was running well. American Eagle is actually doing really well until they had
mhm.
issues releasing people,
Yeah.
getting them out of the
Yes.
train. Getting them in the train
Yes.
wasn't the problem; it was getting them out. And
Yes.
then Goliath. See, the thing with Goliath too is that
Oh yeah.
being one of
Yeah.
the older RMCs, I mentioned to this you at the park. It used to be you could get on the train, put your seatbelt on, shut your lap bar, and go. And they would come
Yep.
by and just check it, and they would pull your seatbelt, check the lap bar, and it would be one quick check. The problem is RMC has seemed to update their ride procedures, their ride
Yep.
operation procedures, to where now it seems like every RMC we've been on in the last about year and a half or so, regardless of what trains they are using, will not allow you to put your lap bar down.
Mhm.
So on new RMCs, where this is the policy from the start, from the open of the roller coaster, all of the locals, all of the GP knows and understands you can't put your lap bar down. But when you get on a coaster like Goliath, where for probably close to 10 years, you could put your lap bar down after you clicked your seatbelt and it wasn't a problem. Now that they've changed that policy and aren't very vocal about it, it
Yeah.
creates issues with dispatching the train because then they
Yes.
have to come by, release your restraint, which usually means they have to release the restraints for that whole car, and then recheck them. And it creates a longer and longer dispatch time the more people they have to release and recheck.
Yes. So, but back to American Eagle, we did think that Eagle was running absolutely spectacularly. We rode it.
Still rough,
Yeah.
uncomfortable,
I don't
might
think it,
fall apart,
yeah. We were
but that's the
literally,
Eagle, man.
yeah. We were literally waiting in line. We were under the station. We were about like maybe 2 or 3 trains away from getting on the ride. And we're just like, we're sitting there waiting to ride it, really wanting to ride it. At the same time, we're like, it's almost to the point where they really should just tear this thing out because, oh my gosh. But it's the battle of like you really wish they could just keep it forever, and at the same time knowing that at some point it's going to have to go, and thinking about the possibilities with which it could be replaced. So, but yeah, Eagle was running absolutely amazing. The second ride obviously was better because the roller coaster had warmed up at that point, and just the amount of force with which you are pulled over the first drop in the last row on this roller coaster, the
Yes.
amount of liftoff on the track. Our second time riding this coaster in the Rose Bowl, the shaking is even worse. The jankiness cranked all the way up to 10, and you're just like, I do actually feel like we're going to fly off the track, and it is slightly concerning.
Here's the thing though. We only got that feeling because the amount of speed that train was pulling at the end of the day.
Yes.
It was running fast, and that is saying something for a 60-degree day. It really is.
Yes.
One thing I would like to point out, I felt like the trains themselves were running smoother. Like it seemed like they
Uh-huh.
had rebuilt the trains really well. It seemed like the wheels were spinning very freely. It didn't feel as square tirey as it normally feels. It was still rough. I mean, the coaster
Yeah.
is almost 40 years old. It is 40 years old at this point. So,
Yes, it is
like, it
actually.
is a 40-year-old Woody. You have to take that in mind when you get on this ride. That being said, I felt like it still was running slightly smoother than in years past. I don't know. It just felt like we got a really, really good ride on this coaster, and I think some of that is just how long we've been away.
Yeah, that could be it
One
too.
thing, one thing we forget about Great America, especially when we go to these other parks, is how well rounded this lineup really is.
Oh yeah.
Like, there's not a bad coaster. Even the Eagle, even the Demon, even like throwing the Dark Knight coaster in that lineup, it's not. None of them are bad. You know what I
Oh
mean? They're at
yeah.
least a good
Yeah.
ride experience, if not a great ride experience.
Oh, yeah. So I feel like we've already kind of talked about Raging Bull and the experience that we got on that. I do want to point this out, and Gabe can talk a lot more about this, but he was talking about the last time he was here, he rode specifically on the teal train, and it did not hit its mid course brake run. So his second half of this roller coaster was more intense than anything he's ever ridden on it before. And unfortunately, when we went there, the teal train was not running. So we suspect they've have found the issue and are fixing the train, which is a damn shame.
Yes.
So, and then we did want to say that we rode Flash, the vertical velocity, formerly known as V2. I will forever and ever call it V2. It will be V2 to me. But a lot of the times, I think we skip this ride because it is generally a bit of a long wait. I mean, obviously, by the nature of the coaster, you can only run train. It does hold a lot of people, but I do think it takes a little bit to get them all loaded in and everything. But we didn't have to skip it this time. The line wasn't that long, and V2 is always just a fun ride. And we were saying too that a lot of the time we thought it was boring because it was so short. But as roller and coaster enthusiasts, we kind of have a newfound appreciation for launch coasters, for something that is not found at a lot of parks, this intimate impulse coaster. And then at the same time, the technology used in this ride, it was just so cool to like look at it and understand some of the parts for the magnets and like the amount of power cables, because we understand the amount of energy this roller coaster requires every single time that it launches. So if you ever see one of these at a park, or if you're here at Six Flags Great America and you have the time, don't skip this ride. It is a fun little ride, and we really enjoyed it this time.
I think for me, as these roller coasters start to get removed from other parks, like Cedar Point removed theirs, that's the one I can think of off the top of my head.
Mm-hmm.
It makes me appreciate vertical velocity a little more, that we still have it at our home park. The other thing I mentioned to Sam is that when I go to Six Flags Great America, I always say this: there's no Intamins there. And then when you actually look at the lineup and realize there's two of them, two
There's
of the
two.
most unique Intamins on the planet, the
Mm-hmm.
American Eagle and the Flash Vertical Velocity, it makes me appreciate both those coasters just a little bit more. And the other thing with the Flash, too, is that it's one of those coasters where the launch is still pretty good. Like the initial kick you
Oh
get from
yeah.
it is still a
Mm-hmm.
pretty good kick. And then just the like looking straight down in the back row when you're on the top of the vertical spike and you're like, holy cow, we're 170 feet in the air,
Oh yeah.
you know? And I think it's the backwards and forwards too that I
Yeah.
appreciate more as I get older. The backward launch section
Yeah.
of that ride. You know, it's another coaster we've started to appreciate more and more over the years. It's funny how that happens. It really is.
Right?
But
So last here, real quick, I know we weren't going to talk too much about Max Force because it's basically the launch, but I did want to talk about. So, like Gabe said, it wasn't open when we initially got into the parks. We went over and rode Viper, and then we heard it testing, so we rode Viper again, and then we walked over there, and then we actually still had to wait about 10 minutes. We saw test riders on it, but as a result of that, me and Gabe got first train on Max Force, and like he also stated, it was a pretty cold day. We did not realize the amount of hang time you get on this coaster when it's actually running slower than it normally is.
yeah, it was very interesting because, like, after the initial launch, you could tell right away the initial launch did not have the same kick that it normally did. I felt at
Mhm.
least.
Mhm.
And by the time we got to the top of the first inversion, it legitimately did not feel like we were going to make it over. Like,
I was so excited for half a second cuz I thought we were going to get our first rollback ever, and it's like
yeah,
it's kind of scary, but you kind of want it to happen at least once to you, and Max Force is kind of the one you want it to happen to you on, not something like a freaking top thrill. So,
yeah, absolutely. And just that moment of, and the thing is too, is when you get to the top of the first elbow, you're upside down. You're not
yeah.
right side up. So not only are you like looking downwards and hanging from your restraint, you're thinking in your head you're about to go backwards and not make it. It was just a very exciting moment. And it did make me appreciate that moment a little bit more. That being said,
Mhm.
Max Force is, for me at least, mostly about that launch. And our second
Yeah.
ride, I felt, was a lot more quality in that department.
Yes.
Max Force is an underrated coaster in my opinion, but at the end of the day, it is only like 25 seconds long.
Yeah. Yeah.
So, as an enthusiast, we love it. The GP says it's too short. I could do that launch over and over and over again and never get tired of it. I know we
Mhm.
did kind of skip over it, but yeah, that it is the third best coaster in the park. So,
It really honestly is. So as we're nearing the end here, I did want to mention this because me and Gabe mentioned it actually quite a few times throughout just walking around the park. But we think we maybe are seeing some of the Cedar Fair influence with the just general state of the park. And we're talking here about the cleanliness of the park, some of the like just some things being repainted. What we thought Batman was maybe repainted that looked really, the track
Batman
looked
had definitely been repainted. I think it got repainted last year, and that's why it was
okay.
closed for a significant amount of time at the end of the year.
Okay.
It also got a complete retheme in the like not retheme, but update
Yeah.
to the theming in the station. Just overall, visually, audibly, and special effects even they added way better, off the charts.
We were
Vertical
like
velocity
enjoying it.
was they rethemed the Yankee Skipper ride to Aquaman and repainted it and
Yeah,
updated it, gave it a fresh new look. I'm kind of disappointed about that one though. I like the Yankee Skipper.
I did too, but we'll have to live with it, I guess.
Several of the restaurants and
Yep.
buildings had been updated, and they also seem to have added a lot more locations to fill your water bottle and bubblers, I felt like.
So yeah, it was just me and Gabe as longtime park goers who've been going there since we've been kids to see the additions of so many coasters and maybe the subtractions of some coasters. It was really refreshing for us just to kind of see like our park being taken care of basically. We're like, it is our home park, and home is really the word of that. It's one of our
Clean. Clean is the word
yes.
we used over and over and over again. Everything felt clean and organized and just nicer.
Yeah, it really did. So it really gives us hope, I think, at least me, it gives me hope to maybe see this influence at other Six Flags parks and to go on our big trip this summer. And we're going to be hitting a couple different Six Flags parks. So it'll be really interesting to see how this is maybe filed out to all of the parks and maybe just have a little bit nicer experience in some of the other aspects of the parks than just the roller coasters themselves. So,
Yeah. That being said, we have to do this at the end of all of our trip talks. I guess you could almost say this is more of a park review than a trip talk specifically.
yeah, yeah, but that's okay.
What are they going to add next? However, I'm going to add the caveat that it cannot be a B&M and you have
Okay.
to remove a roller coaster.
Well, does RMCing a coaster count?
That's not a B&M, so sure.
Okay, I want them to RMC the eagle.
That's what
That
you
is,
think they're going to do next?
I don't know if that's what they're gonna do next. That's what they should do next, because that I would be so cool. It would be so cool. They would have so much room to work with, even if they didn't use the Rose Bowl, and it would be a great way to sort of keep the eagle without keeping the eagle, if you know what I mean. So I
Yes.
personally would love it if they did. I don't know that they ever would. I don't know if they could, but I would love it if they did. So that is my answer.
See, now it's very interesting because we went the same route with what coaster we were going to be removing.
Okay.
Now,
What new
my
age?
only my only hope would be they would remove Superman,
Uh,
but obviously that's not
no,
happening. It's
no,
a
it's too much of
GP.
a
It's
GP
always got a
pleaser.
long line. It's not
Yep.
happening. Anyway, obviously Demon's not going anywhere. I'd like to see
Mm-hmm.
Viper stay. I'd like to see the Wizard stay. I know Eagle is such a cool coaster, but they don't even race it anymore. Even when both
No.
sides are open, it is a wooden
Mm-hmm.
coaster. It is very dilapidated. We made that comment several times that it does
Oh,
look kind of trashy at this
it
point with
really
the paint
does.
fading and chipping and
Yep.
the wood splintering. So they're going to take out American Eagle and they're going to put an Intamin Giga in.
Oh, say that would be so fucking cool
That
too.
would put this park on the map. And I'm not just saying any generic Intamin Giga. I am saying like the first modern Intamin
Ultimate
Giga,
Giga.
just an absolute monster of a roller coaster to put next to Raging Bull, but
Mm.
make it taller, faster, make it ejector airtime instead of floater airtime. Maybe even throw an inversion or two in. Why not, right?
Why not?
And just
So
make it
me,
an epic, epic Intamin Giga.
at sort of the end of the night, when me and Gabe had ridden all the coasters we were going to ride, got multiple re-rides on stuff, it's one thing we talk about with Great America's lineup. They have
Yes.
a very good, well-rounded lineup, but we talk about how they don't really have something that is their quote-unquote flagship ride, something that brings in everybody from enthusiasts to GP goers. So, because we talk about Great Adventure, and at the time it was King Ka and El Toro, and at this point it's still El Toro. You could talk about like any number of them at Cedar Point.
If you
And
take if you take like a Fury 325,
yeah,
drop it into
Carowinds.
this park, it's the best park in the country.
Yeah,
If you take an El
absolutely.
Toro and drop it into this lineup, best park in the country. If you take a Maverick or a Steel Vengeance or an Iron Gwazi or a Voyage or a King Ka or a Top Thrill or I can just keep going and going and going, and
Yes.
you drop it into this lineup, it's the best park in the country. That's the one thing the rack doesn't do. It's
Yes.
another supporting coaster. It's another great coaster, not an ultra elite top 10 in the world coaster.
The thing with the
And that's
rack
really
is
what this park needs.
yes. The thing with the rack is we're like what we kept saying all day long is it looks like a very good layout for a dive coaster. And we really wish we could say that it just looks like a really great layout for a roller coaster. So Gabe is right. The rack
Yeah,
doesn't do that.
putting that
Yeah.
asterisk on there every time you mention it just doesn't quite have the same effect as an Intamin Giga or a Mach Extreme Spinner or
Mhm.
a Intamin prefabricated wooden roller coaster or an Intamin multi-launch coaster or a Giga. Like it just doesn't have the same effect as it's a dive coaster. You know what I
Yep.
mean? Like
Yeah.
it could be
Yes.
one of the best dive coasters on the planet, but it's still not better than Raging Bull, Goliath, and Max Force. It's just
Mhm.
it won't be. It just
Yep.
can't. And
Yep.
we need something better than all three of those coasters because on any given Sunday, you could argue for all three of those roller coasters being the best in the park.
Oh
And that
yeah.
is the true problem at Great America.
Absolutely. But with that, it brings us to the end of our trips talk here about Six Flags Great America that we've kind of turned into a
Yes.
park review, but so it is what
Yes.
it is. Getting into our future, we have about 6 episodes left in our season. Eventually, I'll come out with an actual date on that last episode, but Gabe mentioned this in our previous episode. You will know it's the last episode because we are doing a Coasters 101 finally on the namesake of our podcast, Coaster
The
Wars.
Coaster Wars.
Yes. But before all of that, the next episode that we have coming up is our 7th episode, Coasters with a Soul. Now, me and Gabe have mentioned this a lot. There's some coasters out there that just feel like living, breathing things. And I believe we picked two great coasters to really
Yes, for
embody.
sure. Two coasters that need to be talked about, but in their own way, I
Yes.
guess.
Yeah, absolutely. And then we move on to our 8th episode. We're going to be covering roller coasters with tunnels. We both have two coasters that me and Gabe love and also very much want to talk about. And then I'll move into one more. We have a Coasters 101 coming up finally on a company me and Gabe have mentioned endlessly. We're finally going to tell their story. It is RMC Rocky Mountain Construction.
Yes.
So, with that,
Very
everybody, go ahead.
It's funny, the more and more I look at that episode, it is a very intriguing episode talking about them and just their exponential growth in basically like
Oh,
3 years.
yeah,
one of the
absolutely.
newest one of the newest coaster manufacturers out
Oh,
there
yeah,
too as
yeah,
well. So they have a very young but a very rich history.
absolutely. So, thank you everybody for listening and join us next week for Coasters with a Soul.
And we hope you all have a great day.